EtSEO week. Thank you very much for tuning in, whether it's first thing in the morning or the middle of the night over on the other side of the world. I appreciate you guys all tuning in, and thank you very much, Etsy, for putting together this incredible community. I mean, knowledge is power. So many solopreneurs out there, we're working for ourselves, which is kind of the dream, you know, but there's so many hats we have to wear. And I guarantee it, if I asked out there, how many of you opened your Etsy shop thinking, hey, I want to be a professional photographer too? I don't think anyone did. So that's why it's really important that we're including photography in the EtSEO week. And let me tie that in for you, why we're doing that. Etsy did a study. They did a survey, sent it out to a bunch of buyers, and overwhelmingly the #1 thing that people felt was important, helping the buying decision or, you know, getting them to click through and purchase, was the quality of photography. So we can do a lot on the search engine optimization and the Etsy optimization, but without solid photography, you're not going to get people to click through the store and you're not going to get those conversions. So kudos to y'all for tuning in and learning a little bit about photography today. And there's been a ton of studies out there from all kinds of companies that back this up. Photography is the #1 thing that gets people to go from the browsing to the in the cart to the selling. And what we do here is you've got a couple places where you need to convert or move people to the next stage. First, you've got people that might be searching for a product and they're browsing through the gallery of all the different Etsy shops that are available. Well, you need great photography to stand out in that huge tile pattern of everyone else's products. So you need a great main image, or a hero shot is what we call it in the industry a lot of the time. Secondly, once they're in your store, they need to identify with that product. They need to have a sense of how that would fit into their life and why they would want to buy it. They need a sense of scale so they know how big that product is. Photography needs to communicate a lot in just a few photos because these people aren't able to pick this up, feel it, smell it, move it around, and get a real feel for it. We need to communicate that through pictures. So that's why photography is such an important part of this EtSEO week, and I'm glad you guys are going to go ahead and tune in. So what we're going to do is we're going to switch over to the wide camera here, and before I even talk about anything specifically, before we get into taking pictures, I want to talk about a couple of the tools that we use so that anyone out here, say not everyone here is selling coffee mugs. Say you do soft goods, or you do knitted things, or I saw someone did pet hats, stuff like that. I want to go over a couple handy tools that I use all the time, and they really help out when you're photographing certain kind of products. So let's go through a couple different things that might be nice to have on hand that would apply to everyone, and then we're going to go in and we're going to use 1 or 2 specific products that were nicely donated by a couple of the sellers here at Etsy, and we're going to go ahead and do some product photography. But Julio, let me know how we're looking over here. Can I start jumping into a couple of these products? Okay. So we're going to come in and we're going to go to a little bit of a tighter shot here, all right? And one of the first things that I want to jump on is going to be this removable mounting putty. And how's the lighting on this? Does that work? Can everyone see this pretty clearly? All right. So removable mounting putty, this is something you can get at any craft store, any big box store, anything like that. But what it is, and actually let me flip this light over here too. Is this one going to help? There we go. Give us a little more light on here for now. This removable mounting putty is great if you've got something that just won't stay put. So say I was going to photograph like this little clip, okay, and it's just laying flat there. Well, this mounting putty is great because you can tear it, you can mold it, and it's just really good for propping things up and staying outside of the scene. So right now I can get this little clip to stand up and I can get the shot, and if you take it at a right angle, you won't even see the putty behind it. So if you look at product photography and it's like, oh my God, how did they get their products to get in that perfect position? A lot of times this removable mounting putty is the secret sauce behind that. So if you've got little products or products that are hard to get standing up or at the right angle to photograph them, the mounting putty is going to be something that's just costs you $2 or $3 and is a lifesaver when it comes to styling or positioning your products. So that's one thing I want to talk about. Double-sided tape is another great one, especially if you're doing clothes or fabric. Double-sided tape allows you to not get the wrinkles if you have folded fabric laying down. So double-sided tape is something good to have. Push pins are great. Again, if you're doing soft goods or clothing, so these are like these little T-pins, and you can just stick them into some foam core or stick them into your products. And it's great because if I were having a flat lay or photographing soft goods, I could put the pin under here and then have it like propping up the sleeves so things look a little more fleshed out or three-dimensional. If you're photographing clothes, crumbling up some tissue paper and stuffing the clothes is another way to get dimension to the clothes. So tissue paper is something I don't have out here, but it's another one of those things that are really great to have. So there's so many little crafty things that you can have around the house, or you should pick up around the house, that are very cost efficient and work really well to help you really fill out, flesh out, and show your products in the absolute best light, and help you get a better angle to showcase them as well. All right, aluminum foil is another great one. We're going to talk about reflectors here in a second, but aluminum foil is great because it can just go ahead and create some really neat highlights and reflections of the light. Fishing line. Fishing line is another big one. If anyone's doing jewelry photography, fishing line is great because it allows you to suspend a ring in the air or a necklace in the air, and it's monofilament. It's like almost see-through. So hanging this allows you to get those floating product shots without having to do any kind of crazy Photoshop or anything like that. So fishing line is really cost efficient, another good one. We're actually going to use fishing line here in the afternoon because we're going to be hanging some Christmas ornaments down, or not in the afternoon, at the end when we do a stylized shot, we're going to be hanging some Christmas ornaments down, and we did that with fishing line. So again, you want to try to get all of this stuff done in camera. We call this like practical effects. So you don't want to do a lot of Photoshop. You don't want to have to do a lot of editing. What we're going to do today, we're going to take all the pictures with our phone, and we're going to edit all the photos in our phone. So having the right little tools and little hacks and DIY stuff to help make that easier and look better in camera saves you all the post-production afterwards. All right. The last thing I want to talk about is jewelry. Really quick, we're not going to photograph jewelry here, but I want to give you an example of a really cool product, or a really cool tip. Now, I actually learned this years ago while working on an Etsy lookbook shoot. And I'm going to switch over. Let's switch over to the iPhone camera. Could we do that, Julio? All right. So if we're looking through the iPhone right now, not trying to take an award-winning photo here, but I just want to show you an example of a common issue. And chime in the chat if you've ever run into this photographing jewelry. Have you ever tried to get the chain to just sit perfectly, to get like a nice smooth arc to it? You see how I'm kind of having an issue here? Just with my finger trying to get that smoothed out. It's really difficult because everywhere you touch it, you get a little bump out in there. Let me go ahead and zoom in a little bit so you can see what I mean. So if I'm trying to move this over, you always get like a little bump out from where you touch it. Well, if you want to cut to the wide one really quick, Julio, here's one of the best tools that you can have. Straws. I mean, go down to any fast food store or restaurant or whatever, grab a straw, and here's the technique, okay? You just use the straw and you gently blow in the middle of the chain here. So if you want to go over to the phone one here, Julio. Look at how easily I was able to get the perfect arch here, just blowing gently through the straw and letting the air get me that nice fluid motion. So, is the volume a little bit loud, guys? Okay. So if you do that, I'll talk a little bit quieter here because I do have a loud voice. If you do that, it's going to allow you to get a nice, beautiful lines there without, having to fudge a million times with your fingers and stuff. So that's another one where just a cheap plastic straw, or if you've got the metal straws at home, you're not trying to make waste that way. It's really nice and is a really great hack to try to get those chains and stuff set up really nicely. So those are some of the tools that we use all the time in studio, and it's just really little craft supplies that cost a couple dollars and you can pick up at a general store just about anywhere. So I wanted to get those out of the way because these are a lot of neat little things that I've picked up over time that wouldn't be obvious. So if you guys have any questions, or if you have any other little tools or craft items, chime in the chat, share it with your fellow sellers over there. All right. So let me clear all this off, and we are going to quickly jump over to now getting into the nitty-gritty, the photography, talking about the lighting. So we're going to take just a quick 5 seconds to clear this off and jump over. All right. So we've got such cute little products over here. These are the three they're going to be working with today. Oh, we're in? Okay. So the two things that we're going to cover are we're going to do a studio shot and a lifestyle shot. So those are specifically what they're called. If you guys go to the Etsy Seller Photography Guide, awesome resource. I read through it. I think they've got 12 different sections in there and cover all kinds of great tips. So make sure you check that out. But what we're going to cover today here live is going to be a studio shot, which is essentially your clean product photography shot where you have your product on a white background and it just allows the product to take the center stage. It's simple. Your customers or potential customers can see, get a feel for the product right away, click through, and then once you get in there, I think you have up to 10 photographs that you can have per listing. Then we're going to talk about a lifestyle shot. The lifestyle shot is where we go from this clean, almost sterile kind of photograph, and we start propping it out using props and different textures and materials to tell more of a story about your product, how that product would fit in the person's life, a sense of scale, comparing it to other things. So we've got the mug here, and we've got a coaster, so you can see how big this mug is or how big that coaster is compared to your standard coffee cup. You know, we can put some seasonal stuff in there if you got stuff coming up. I know we got holidays coming up, so maybe you do Christmas themed stuff. So we're going to start with a simple studio shot and then move our way into what we call the lifestyle shot. So the first things first, we have to figure out our lighting, okay? So lighting is a huge consideration here. You can see I've already got window light behind me. And are we on the wide one so that everyone can see this behind? Okay, perfect. All right, so if you look behind me here, I've got a nice corner window, and I've positioned the table over here, so the light is coming in from the left, all right? You generally want your light coming in from an angle off to the left or the right, and what that does is creates some shadow. If I had the window, if I set this up like this, where the light was behind my product, obviously it would create all shadow, so that wouldn't work. But you do want a little bit of shadow because the shadow creates that sense of depth and dimension, all right? It makes it three-dimensional looking. Oh yeah, great, thank you for pointing that out. So if anyone's wondering what this is here, this is poster board. So this is the kind of stuff you would get at the corner store that you would make signs and banners and stuff with. And it's one of two options we've got to make the background. Thank you for asking for that, because I probably shouldn't have had that in there already. Perfect. So when we're doing the consideration of where we're gonna set up your home studio, if you haven't set one up already, we're looking for two things. We're looking for lighting, so you want a big window, but then you're probably going to want to look for a wall, or maybe if you don't have a wall handy near a window, you can use the back of a chair, and that's going to give us the ability to use some poster board or something like that to give us that nice clean sweep. But I'm going to jump into that in just 1 second. If you look over here, let me go ahead and jump over to this camera. Let's jump over to the phone camera. Right now, are we on a phone? Yeah. Okay. So right now, you see how soft and round everything looks? Nice, smooth transition from the highlight to the shadow. This is called indirect lighting, which means the sunlight isn't hitting this straight on. Look what happens if I go into the window. See how hard that light is and the shadows that it creates? This is direct lighting. We want to avoid direct lighting as product photographers because it just creates too much contrast, harsh shadows, and doesn't really give a nice, soft, pleasing wrapping light that allows you to see all the details of your product. So that's the other consideration. If you live somewhere where all buildings have a north side of the building, that's usually a good place to start because generally your sun moves from east to west. So the northern side of your building is always going to have a little bit of shade. So if you have a window on the north side of your building in your home, that's a really good place to set this up. If not, right here, we unfortunately don't have a northern facing window in this office, but we have some overhangs and some trees that are knocking down the light a little bit. Another thing you can do if you just really can't find a window in your house that has this indirect light, if it's only just this really bright, harsh sunlight hitting your product, is you can start to try to soften this light a little bit. And you can do that a number of ways. I could come in here and just hang a big bed sheet up here, and that would make it nice and soft because it would block and it would take that hard direct sunlight and make it soft diffuse sunlight. Or honestly, photography equipment is getting so affordable nowadays. For the price of a bed sheet, you can get a big reflector like this. Let me go ahead and bring this in. All right. So something like this right here is a 4x6 reflector, okay? and it folds down fairly small to about this big. And these are really affordable. So, I mean, you can probably get these for $30 to $40 US. And honestly, at this point, instead of going the DIY route with hanging a bed sheet here, I would honestly just get one of these if you're going to be doing this consistently. And the keyword is consistency, because we want all your photographs to look the same no matter when you take them, so that when people go to your shop, they have a consistent visual experience. So this thing pops up, and I can just bring it right over here and diffuse the light in the window just like that. So even if I do have sunlight directly coming through, this is still going to soften that. And look at, if we switch over to the phone camera, all right, coming over here, we still have that nice soft kind of wrapping quality of light, where previously we had the harsh highlights and shadows and you couldn't even see part of the cup because it was in shadow. So just to recap really quick, those are your considerations. Try to find a place that has window light. Make sure the window isn't behind your product photography. Make sure it's over to the side or maybe even over your shoulder a little bit, okay? And then if you can't find an area where you've got that indirect light, go ahead and just use some kind of diffusion panel like this. It could be a white bed sheet, or it could be one of these pop-up reflectors. If you're searching for these online, these are just going to be called a collapsible reflector. And inside of it is going to be all the diffusion material. All right. Perfect. So now let's go ahead and jump into our backgrounds, okay? I kind of jumped the gun on this a little bit there. So what we like to do for a background, especially when you're doing that clean white product photography, is you want what they call a sweep, or like an infinity wall, where you photograph in it and you don't see corners and edges and shadows. It's just a beautiful clean background. So let me get the poster board over here. Poster board is a really great, easy way to do it. And what's great about it is just the ease of use. I mean, these things cost a couple cents, okay? I can work it out just like this. Or if I want to make sure it doesn't move or slip and slide in between shoots, I could have the back of a stool or the back of a chair here, or in this case, I'm using the wall, and I'm just going to use some tape just to tape it to the wall right here so it doesn't go anywhere, all right? And now the specific tape I'm using is called gaffer's tape, or gaff tape. It's G-A-F-F. It's important because it kind of looks like black duct tape, but it doesn't have the sticky residue. So if you're trying to do product photography in your home and you're taping your poster board to the back of a stool or a chair, and then a couple hours later you've got friends and family coming over, you can rip the tape off and it's not going to leave sticky residue all over your chairs or all over your wall and pulling your paint off. So I recommend looking into gaffer's tape. It's another one of those unique tools as a product photographer that we can use for everything, and then we're not tearing up our walls and our furniture in between our different photo shoots. So what we've done here is we've created this beautiful sweep. So Julio, can you go ahead and jump over to the camera, the phone camera again? All right. So looking at that, here's the wide shot. And then there we go. You can see that this is why they call it a sweep or an infinity wall, because there is no line, crease, or anything going on back behind there. Let's go to the wide, because there's one other thing I want to show you. How many of you out there have products? How many of you out there have products that are bigger than a coffee cup? A couple people chiming in. A lot of people probably have products that are bigger than a coffee cup. So how do you do this at larger scale? Well, here's where this roll of paper comes in handy. And most people probably don't even know that you can get these. Again, super affordable, couple bucks. This is the kind of roll of paper that you would put on the table for your kids to draw on, and then you just kind of tear off the paper and they can draw on it again. Or if you go to a restaurant, they roll out the paper on top of the restaurant and they use it as kind of like a tablecloth. So this stuff you can find anywhere is super affordable. And what's neat about it is you see this little sweep we made? I can go ahead, if I can get the tape off here, I can go ahead and use this to create a giant sweep. So I could have a massive one. So it doesn't matter how big my product is, I could have that same kind of effect for how tall or whatever we need to do. And again, this is something, just a regular roll of paper. Don't buy photo paper, because for some reason in the photo industry, if you take a roll of paper and then you call it photo paper, it costs 10 times as much. So that's why I'm trying to give you all the DIY hacks and places that you can find this at craft stores to make it really affordable. So don't buy photo paper, just buy regular roll of paper, poster paper, whatever they call it. And you can get a giant sweep for those larger products, and you're saving yourself a lot of money doing it that way. All right. So next thing, let's go ahead and start building this out, all right? We've talked about the light a little bit. We found the perfect window. It's indirect, no hard sunlight, so I don't need to have any diffusion or anything. I got lucky here, okay? And I've got my camera set up. Now let's talk about my camera setup a little bit first, all right? I've just got a regular iPhone. It's not even the fancy iPhone 14. I think this is like a 12 or something like that. So it's a couple years back. But what's great about all these phones on the market now is most of them have multiple camera lenses. But what I mean by that is you've got 2 or 3 different camera lenses back here. And if you don't, you normally have a zoom function all the same. So I'd recommend that you use the zoom in function. So right here is your normal shot. It's going to make the product look very small. So instead of using a macro lens, like if we were using a big DSLR, I'm just going to go ahead and zoom into the 2.5, and it's going to give me a better kind of true to life size. There's not going to be any distortion like that. The other thing we have to think about now that we've zoomed in a little bit is where do we take the photo from? Okay, so you can create a lot of distortion and make your product look really different just depending on where you take the photo from. So you can see how high I am here, and Julio, flip back and forth between the camera and the thing. Look at that angle. Okay, now I'm going to drop down and look at that angle. Okay, now just keep it on the iPhone for this one for a second. I'm just going to go up so people can watch. If I go to about here, it's making the coffee cup look really short, isn't it? The same thing applies for people photography. If you're out there taking pictures of your friends, you know, if you get too high, you make them look short. If you want to make someone look taller, get lower. So for product photography, I recommend you shoot pretty much straight on. So for this, we're going to go ahead and shoot from this angle. And if you flip back over to the phone, Julio, you can see how this is just enough to see into the top lip of the coffee cup, but we're not distorting it, making it look short, making it look weird dimensions and stuff. The other thing I've got over here is just a little travel tripod. You can get these. They don't have to be super expensive. We're just using a phone here, so it doesn't need to be able to support a whole bunch of weight. And it's got this ability to go up and down. And that's going to help with getting our shots lined up, okay? So I don't have to worry about holding the phone. I can then focus on, you know, the rest of the stuff we're going to do over here, styling, propping, and lighting. But the other thing, too, is it's going to give us consistency. So we're talking about SEO, search engine optimization. How do you make your store stand apart? Well, if I go to your store and every other photo looks like it was taken at a different time of day or a different time of year or on a different camera or edited differently or the products are different, there's no consistency there. So I don't have the peace of mind that I'm going to get a consistent experience or a consistently good product from your store. So we want consistency in all things. We want our camera angle to be consistent. So if I have 7 different mugs that I'm going to photograph, I want my camera, my lighting, everything to stay the same. And I just want to swap my products in and out 7 different times. Okay, that consistency. So when people go to your store, they see that consistency. Now, if you go to any like popular coffee chain or fast food restaurant that might be around the world, why on earth do people go to that one coffee shop, whether they're in Germany or whether they're in New York City? Well, people love consistency. People love knowing that they're going to get that comfortable, consistent experience that they're used to, and they want the same thing from photography. We crave that consistency in life. So by having the same style, same angle, same editing, you're going to get that message through that you are a consistent seller, and you'll have that confidence in you'll instill that confidence in your buyers. So we've got our camera angle. We're shooting straight on. I've got it steadied on a tripod, so I don't have to touch this ever again, really, okay? We've got our nice infinity sweep. We've got our soft light, but this doesn't look like a good photo. So what are we going to do now? We've got to do something about this shadow area. So Julio, if you can just show just the coffee cup. See all this shadow area we've got over here? We need to fill that in. Now we're going to do that with some reflectors, okay? Now, here's another thing you can go spend. You can go spend $100 plus buying fancy photo reflectors, or you can go to the craft store and get what's called foam core. It's just these white boards that you can then put tacks in to stick things in. If you were doing a presentation at school or something, you needed to put a bunch of tacks and pins there. I like these foam core boards because they're thick, they're white reflective. And the other thing I was telling you about tinfoil earlier, you can wrap them in tinfoil so you get 2 kinds of reflectors. You can get the white one and you can get the silver one. And now what I'm going to do is I'm going to bring them in to the opposite side of the sun, okay? So the light is coming from this direction from my window. I'm going to bring these in over to the opposite side. And if you switch over to the coffee mug shop or the iPhone camera, you want to switch over to iPhone for me, Julio? Watch what happens as I bring this in, okay? I'm bringing my white reflector in. Look at how it's filled up and made that brighter there. All right, no reflector, white reflector. No reflector, white reflector. Now, why would I need the silver reflector? Okay, silver reflector is going to add that fill, is going to brighten up the shadow side, but because it's silver, it's going to gather more of the light more efficiently. It's going to be a brighter reflector. So let me go ahead and bring that in here. So let's switch over to the iPhone again, Julio. Boom, now look at that. Now with the silver reflector, I even get like little bright specular highlights on there. So if you have a shiny product, you can get like that nice little bright spot, they call it a specular highlight in there. You can do that. So let's pull back to the wide shot, and I want to kind of show how this works. So the closer I bring the reflector, the brighter it makes those shadows. The farther away I get the reflector, the darker the shadows become, okay? So it's super simple. What I do is I just look on the back of my camera, and I start really far away, and I just bring it closer, 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 and I'm like, boom, that's the light I want right there. That's gorgeous, okay? So how do I get that to stay there? Again, super cost-efficient options. I just like to use these little clamps. You get it like a tool store, like the big orange or big blue box tool stores, or go to your corner store. And these are called A-clamps, these little clamps here. And you just clip them on, all right? And then I can just stand it right up just like that. All right, so there you go. The other thing too is if you don't want clamps, or what if you have bigger products, let me show you an option for that too. So I want to make sure that everyone sees how the concepts can apply to no matter what size or kind of product you guys are selling. All right. How are we doing on time? Oh, we're good. Okay. So this is another one of those poster boards, but this is a trifold poster board. So this would be exactly what you used at a school science fair or a project like that. See how it folds open right here, and you'd be able to put your science project and all the information and use those T-pins that we talked about, the tack stuff here. But I like this because look, it stands up on its own and is a giant reflector. So out of the box, it only costs $1 or $2, and I can just go ahead and put this right here on the counter. And now what it's doing is it's huge. The bigger the reflector, the more light it's going to be able to bounce back, and the brighter that fill light's going to be. So when in doubt, go big, go for the big size. And then what you can do is if it's too bright, you can just slowly move it away. All right, so always opposite the light. So let's go over to the iPhone and see what kind of a difference this is going to make. Perfect. So I've got this. I'm just going to march it in here in the front. That's beautiful. So right now we have a really good looking shot, and all we've done is used a little bit of poster board for the background to get us that infinity sweep going on, and then a little bit of foam core board, the thicker stuff, to do there as a reflector. So with a window and I don't know, maybe $3 or $4 in props US, you're able to get great studio consistent quality light. And what's great about this is I can just drop all kinds of things in here. So we've got a flashlight that we were using behind the scenes, all right? So just a regular flashlight. I'm just doing a new example here. So let's switch over to the iPhone photo. You want to talk consistency so that you've got an optimized store and everything looks the clean and the same throughout all of your products. I've got this set up. I just take out the coffee cup. I drop in my flashlight. I take out my flashlight. I drop in the wallets that I'm selling. Whatever it is, whatever you sell, you just set it up, get your lighting perfect, and then for consistency's sake, take all your product shots back to back to back, because you never know when a rain cloud's going to come out or the sun's going to set and your lighting's going to change. So for consistency's sake, once you get dialed in like this, make sure you take all your product photos so they all look the same. All right. All right, do we have any questions that popped up? We're going to do a Q&A there at the end, but Julio will pitch me any questions if it's something that I don't address or don't think we're going to be able to address just off the cuff here. One.
How do you adjust reflections if it's a stationary LED light that fills the entire box? Any tips?
Oh, if they're using artificial lights? That's a good question. So if you're asking questions about artificial light, put those in the Q&A section. We will go ahead and get to those at the end. I'm going to do about 10 minutes of Q&A at the end. And if we don't get a chance to directly answer your question in the Q&A, I know there's a bunch of people from EtSEO in the chat, and I'll be able to chime in too after the fact, and we're going to make sure that we follow up and get your questions answered, because I don't want anyone to walk away here still with a bunch of questions. Oh, is there a question about landscape and portrait? Yeah, that's a good question. So I'm not a millennial, or I think, I don't know, what am I, 38? So I'm on the cusp of the millennials. I'm of the generation that grew up taking photos sideways because the TVs are sideways, but I know anyone under 25 has probably only had their camera in the vertical orientation because of social. But doing some research and talking to the folks over at Etsy, I do believe that the main first photo that you have is actually a landscape photo. And if you set up to take your pictures in landscape orientation, when they're cropped to a thumbnail, you'll actually be able to get more information in there. So if we had it in vertical orientation, the top and the bottom get cropped off to create the thumbnail on the website. If you do landscape orientation, you're going to be able to fit more in there. So for this instance, just taking the product photography on white, it doesn't matter so much because most of those are going to get cropped to almost a square. But when we do our lifestyle shots, thank you for bringing that up in chat, whoever mentioned that, we're probably going to want to go landscape mode just so we can fit more into the scene. Oh, what's the question?
Photo size. What's the ideal photo size for uploading?
Oh, good question. So the ideal photo size, if you guys go to the Etsy Seller's Guide, they actually walk you through what the dimensions, resolution, color profile, and all that is supposed to be. Make sure that you reach out to the folks in Etsy and chat, and also check out the resources on the Etsy.com website, because they constantly keep you updated on what their recommendations are for the best size, color profile, dimensions, all that kind of stuff. Oh, got a question about flat lay. We're going to jump over to the flat lay stuff here in a second after we get into our lifestyle shoot, because I want to explain that. Flat lays is where you do your camera straight overhead and you're shooting down. So we have a product here. I don't know if we're going to have time to get to photographing all of them, but one of the sellers sent in this beautiful coaster. Let me go ahead and just put this here on this camera. Sent in a beautiful coaster. You can see that right here. They've got all kinds of fruits and stuff in there. I love these. These are a perfect opportunity to photograph a flat lay. So instead of photographing into the sweep like this, we would go ahead and go over the top, shooting straight down. So if you want to switch between the cameras, you can see how I've got this going straight down, and then you can see the iPhone shot there. So flat products like this, if you do like greeting cards or wedding invitations, things like that, you're going to be doing a flat lay orientation, and that's when a tripod is really going to come in handy. I don't want to digress too much, but they have tripods that actually have a little crossbar. So you can have a tripod like this, and then it would have a little bar that goes left and right so that you can get your camera up over so it's shooting down. Same thing though, your light is going to come from the left or right. You want soft light, and then the opposite side of your window or LED, you're going to put your white bounce card to fill that in. So all the lighting concepts stay the same, whether we're shooting into the sweep or we're shooting overhead straight down. So the lighting concepts remain the same, just depending on what product you're doing. You might zoom in or out, go down, or straight into it. The other thing too is if you photograph little, super little guys, I love this one. Julio, can you flip over to the seller side really quick so people can see who donated these products? So this is the little dog mermaid. I'm going to go off the tripod here because I want to show you that if you're photographing with your phone, it's really all you need. Because even for super tiny products like this, the iPhone handles macro photography really well. So if you look at this shot, I'm just zooming in. I mean, look at the photograph we can take of this adorable little guy with just the window light, the reflector, and the iPhone. I mean, this is macro photography. 5-10 years ago, I would have had to have a really expensive camera and macro lens to be able to get a shot like this. Nowadays, we can do it with an iPhone. So I love where we're at. It just enables creators to jump out there, and we can do so much of it ourselves. It's really cool. This guy's awesome. Thank you for sending this. Make sure you, please make sure you throw the seller side up there so people can see where that one came from. They're adorable. And I love the coaster. So let me jump back over here. Okay. Next, I want to go ahead and get into our lifestyle shot. So actually, scratch that. Hang on, time out. Want to make sure I actually took a good photo of the mug because we got to do some post-production. We got to do some editing here in a second. Let me actually make sure I didn't walk away without getting a good photo for us to edit of our coffee cup here. So again, you see what I'm doing? I'm getting back in position. I'm lowering down, so I'm shooting pretty much straight at the cup, okay? I'm keeping it centered in the frame. Are we switched over to the phone view? Yep. Perfect. I'm keeping it centered in the frame. And notice how I have negative space. That's what we call this area around the product as negative space. Now, if you know you're taking these photographs and you're going to dump them over and do some design so you can make a template for social media and put some text and all that kind of stuff, you're going to want that negative space. Also, for the white product photography shots like this, we know that it's going to be cropped into almost a square for thumbnails on the website. So you always want to leave plenty of room around it. You can always crop in a little bit, but you can't crop back out. So when in doubt, leave yourself some space, okay? It gives you room to do design and put some copy there, which is wording. And at the same time, too, it's going to let you have space. So if they crop in on the website, you still look really good. So let me go ahead and bring in our reflector here, and we'll just take that shot. Great. Okay. So now let's switch over to the lifestyle shot. So I'm going to go ahead and we're going to do a quick swap here. All right. And Julio is actually going to hop around behind the camera and mute it for 1 second. We're going to do a quick change here. So the next thing we're jumping into is the lifestyle shot. So your lifestyle shot is your chance to tell a story, okay? It's where you want to prop things out and style things and show them with context so that people don't just see a coffee cup, they see themselves on Christmas morning with a warm cup of hot cocoa, watching their family open presents. You see what I'm getting at? We're trying to tell a story, trying to tell a story when it comes to that. So what I've got here is I'm going to go from a clean white background. All right. I'm going to go from a clean white background to now trying to tell a story. So you might have a nice hardwood end table next to your couch where you're having your hot cocoa and watching your family open presents. So you want some wood. Well, right here, I just pulled this. This is actually the door of a cabinet. I just unscrewed a cabinet, grabbed it, and we're going to be able to put it down here and use it as a background for our photos, or as a bottom, as kind of like a part of our prop. The other cool thing is too, if you look all over Etsy, it's become really popular now where people are selling stick-on kind of adhesive backgrounds. So you could have a roll of paper that looked like marble stone, or a roll of paper that looked like wood. And what that lets you do is take your foam core, apply the sticky marble or wood to it, and then your foam core looks like wood, or looks like a marble background, or looks like a tile backsplash. So you don't have to go to the hardware store and build out all these things. You can just order sticky adhesive, like wallpaper almost, that looks like wood and looks like stone. Or if you're like me, you just unscrew your kitchen cabinet and we can use that. So let's switch over to the iPhone here. Okay. I'm going to drop this back in. I'm going to go vertical here for a second. Okay. And now we're going to start styling this out. So I want to go a little bit higher now because I don't want to have that molding in the background. That looks a little bit better. Okay, I like that there. I'm still straight on. I'm just barely at a little angle up. Okay, and now Julio is going to help me with our fishing line. So Julio, if you can come in, let's drop that down. Are we on a wide enough shot that they can see that? Okay. So we're going for a holiday theme here. We're going to go for a Christmas theme just because we've got the decorations out and we're starting to get ready to start decorating. So we've already hung up kind of a little decorative ornament there on some fishing line. And I'm going to have you keep going lower, 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 right there. Perfect. Okay. All right. So we've got some fishing line. And we're able to suspend that ornament in the background without, you know, having any kind of Photoshop necessary. It kind of just disappears, all right? So we're looking at the phone here. Now, when we look at composition and we're using different props, you don't want to have things in front of your product, okay? And you don't want to have things on the same plane as your product, so necessarily left and right. Because as visual people, our eyes generally go to the sharpest, the brightest, and the most centered thing in the scene, okay? So if I have a bunch of stuff standing up right here, you don't want to confuse your viewer and be like, okay, what is this store selling? Are they selling clamps, ornaments, or coffee cups? You know, you don't want to introduce any confusion. So to start off, to keep it safe, I would recommend you probably only use 1 to 2 props, maybe 3, and you want to put them on different planes. So you want to put them in the foreground and the background, and this is your middle ground. So if you think of depth right here. So we've got our little ornament in the back, and let me start getting some more props here. All right. I've got part of my Christmas tree, and again, if I put it here, that actually looks kind of nice, but it's kind of crowding the scene. Do you see how it looks a little crowded? What if I move it towards the back? I kind of love it coming around the back a little bit. There we go. Again, see how it kind of goes a little bit out of focus? So the sharpest thing is our coffee mug here, and that's a little blurrier in the background, which is nice, so it doesn't draw so much attention to itself, but it's still, you know, we're starting to get a Christmas vibe here. We've got the ornament in the background, okay? And now we can start playing with some foreground stuff. So I've got little trees here, and again, I'm not going to put them right here, crowding out and hiding the coffee cup. I'm going to put them more towards the front, and see, I'm kind of just framing stuff out here. There we go. Perfect. And let me go ahead and lower this just a little bit. Excellent. And we'll go ahead and take that shot. All right, so that's what we're working with. So from this, our clean product shot, to a stylized shot, really quick and easy. And still, there's no confusion about what we're selling here. We're definitely selling a coffee cup, but you can now picture this in the context of a Christmas morning, waiting for your kids to open up their presents. And, you know, if you were good at Photoshop, maybe you add a little steam in there from like the hot cocoa. You know what I mean? So just have little steam coming out of there. But that's extra credit. You know, maybe that'll be another Etsy class when we do special effects in Photoshop and editing and stuff like that. So my big takeaways from doing a stylized shot, okay? You don't just want to throw a bunch of stuff. My thing is keep it simple. That's what I like to do. So I recommend you only start with maybe 1 or 2 props to keep it simple. Never put them, and are we in a camera that they can see the different layers here? Okay. Never put them where everything is all stacked on the same layer as your product. You want things in what we call the foreground and the background. And then you also want them, let's switch over to the phone camera. And then you also want them to be, think about a circle radiating out around your product. So you want them in the lower corners, back behind, up above. You want a kind of a circle of safe space around your product so there's no confusing what you're selling. And then by having them in the foreground and the background, they don't take over the scene. Okay, and then having them around the frame, they stay as support products instead of trying to steal the show. So keep it simple, keep it to 1 or 2, keep it on a different plane from your product, okay, and make sure that nothing's really overlapping your product too much. All right, so now we're going to kick over into editing. So let me grab a chair. Let's go over here to the camera view, Julio, and let's kick over into editing. Oh, yeah. Want to go to the wide shot for that? So if we're on the wide camera, you can see Julio, we actually wrapped it through a little cross beam in the ceiling, and we just have another little clip on one side, and you're able to pull on that, and you can lower it up and down. So we just ran it through the little, you know, we have like a crosshatch little ceiling situation up here, and we have it on a nail on a hook where we're hanging a painting on the wall, and that way you can raise and lower that, so you get that option there. So fishing line, I'll tell you what, all these little tools we covered there at the beginning, you never know when you're going to use them. So that's why I wanted to cover them first, because you're going to be sitting there and you'll be like, oh, I can't get this to stand up properly. Well, use the molding putty. Oh, I wish I could float something in there. Oh, we'll use the fishing line and hang it. So having those tools handy is great because you never know when you need them, but you know when you do, okay, when you're having a problem getting that product just right. So let's switch over to the camera view again. I'm sorry, the phone view. All right. Okay. Let's go. Now we're going editing time. If you want to reset one of those cameras, maybe so we have a tight option, I'll switch back and forth here. But for the most part, let's stay in the phone. So I've got our two product shots. I'm just going to heart this one and heart that one, okay? And are we over on the phone view?
Yeah, you're on the
Phone? Okay, great. So let me go ahead and jump in. And a good photograph should not need a lot of editing. That's why I talked, most of this class was about the lighting and where to position things and how to position your camera, because my motto as a professional photographer for almost 20 years is get it right in camera. I love taking pictures. I hate sitting at my desk working on my computer. And I know y'all didn't become creatives and entrepreneurs and solopreneurs to sit at your computer all the time, okay? So having said that, we're gonna do minimal editing to try to get maximum results here. So I'm in my iPhone and I'm just gonna edit. Never hit auto. What does auto mean? You know, a landscape photo versus a portrait versus a product shot, all of those require different kind of approaches. So I never do auto. But if I look at this, I maybe want to make it a little bit brighter. So exposure is a great place. So just to outline really quick, what we're going to do is I'm going to show you how to do most of the things here in the editing features that come with your phone for free. So you should be able to take all these photos and edit them right away with no additional software. And then I'm going to jump over into one piece of free software that you get from Adobe, which is called PS Express, Photoshop Express. And then finally, we're going to jump over and I'll do a quick sneak peek if we have time of Adobe Express, which is something that you guys should all have a free trial to just going through the EtSEO week. So let me jump back over here to the camera. So we're in here, and first thing I'm going to do is just change exposure. See how it's brightening everything. Exposure is what you call a global adjustment. Everything in the scene gets brighter, okay? Then we can start jumping over here to more specific things. So now we're talking about the highlights. So if I slide back and forth here, just the bright white things are going to be affected. None of the shadow, none of the midtone. So if you look at my background. If I do my highlights up, look at how nicely it boosts the background there. So here's before, and here's after. We're just brightening the photo a little bit, brightening that background, just making it look polished and popping off just a little bit more. I'm going to go back here to exposure just a little bit more, okay? Shadows, I don't need to do anything with because we don't need to go in here and raise our shadows in the editing app because we use the big poster board and the foam core as a reflector to fill in the shadows in camera. So see how this all works? If you're using your reflectors, you don't have to spend as much time editing, which is awesome, okay? So I'm going to skip that one. Contrast, this just makes the brights brighter and the darks darker. Right now, I think we have good contrast. You know, if I jacked it up here, we could have darker shadows, and if I lightened it, we can have softer shadows. But I'm going to leave the contrast kind of where it is, okay? Then we're going to switch over here. Brightness, we don't have to worry about because we did the overall exposure. Now, I want to talk about saturation and vibrance. If you're not going to remember anything from the editing, I want you to remember the difference between these two, okay? Saturation makes everything brighter. So if I look at this beautiful mug, it already has a bright blue. So if I crank the saturation, look at how fake the blue looks. It doesn't make the blue look any better. So what saturation does is saturation increases the vividness of the colors for everything. Where I want you to live is in vibrance. Vibrance looks at the colors in the mid-tone range and colors that aren't already super bright. So by increasing the vibrance, it's bringing out the blues, but also bringing out the gold a little bit more too. So vibrance looks more subtle and natural. If you use saturation, it can look comical and clown-like, very unprofessional very quickly. If you use just the vibrance, it can bring out the colors while still maintaining a natural kind of look. So I recommend you do vibrance. Now, if for some reason your pictures look really red or green or blue, like warm or cool, like say you know the difference between a bright sunlight or a warm lamp in your living room. That's warmth is the lamp of your living room. Blue or cool is the bright white sunlight. This is where you would adjust that. So our cameras do a really good job of getting white balance automatically. But if I wanted to cool it down or warm it up, here's where you could make those fixes. But again, if you take a good photo, normally you don't have to fix much. So we're going to leave that alone. All right, finally, you're going to go over here. The other thing you might do is sharpness. If your camera's on a tripod or some kind of clamp mount or something like that, chances are you're not going to have a blurry, shaky hand. Me, I drink too much coffee. So if I were hand holding my photos, all my photos would be blurry and I'd probably have to crank the sharpness. Because I don't, because it was on a tripod, it's already sharp. So I don't really have to over sharpen too much. So I'm just going to sharpen just a little bit so it looks just a little crispier when I upload it to the Etsy store. Okay? And then you hit done. So there's really not a lot to do with the editing to make a good starting photo look great. But if you look at the difference here, the original and that, you can see that it really does make a difference. More pop, more polish, more contrast. Now, let's get out of here. I'm going to hit cancel on this. And I want to show you a third-party app that we can use, okay? And this app is called PS Express. It's right here on the bottom. And now this is called, it's basically Photoshop Express. So it's like a little version of Photoshop for your phone. So let me go ahead and bring that in. And I'm going to bring in a couple photos here. I'm going to add them. Oh. There we go. Something's always going to crash during a live broadcast. You can guarantee it. All right. So we're going to bring these in. And the reason, before I even get into editing here, what I want to explain is the reason I'm in Photoshop Express is you'll see it has the exact same editing features that your photo editor free with your phone does. But we want to talk about consistency, right? So if you have 7 mugs that you're selling, you took 7 different photos of the same lighting setup, instead of having to 7 times adjust my highlights, adjust my brightness, adjust my contrast, adjust my sharpness, in an app like PS Express, I can have all those same edits and then I can save them as a preset and then apply those edits to every single one of my photos, different products in the same setup. And I'll show you how really quickly it's called batch processing to get you that consistency. So then again, people go to your store, your photos look great, and every one of your photos look the same and they all look great. So that's the goal here. So the reason you would use Photoshop Express over just your in-camera or your natural phone app is to get that ability to do the edits and apply them to multiple products. So I'm going to open up the photo here, and I'm going to go to adjustments on the bottom left. All right. And I'm just going to go over here, and you'll see the exact same options that I had. I've got exposure. I can make it a little bit brighter. Okay. I've got highlights. I can make my background brighter. See how my background's getting brighter? I just keep swiping over. I don't need to do any temperature controls or anything. I'm going to do vibrance. Make it a little more vibrant, not saturated, not oversaturated, but just a little more vibrant. And then over here is a bunch of extras. Texture and clarity are kind of like sharpening. Texture just gives a little more pop and a little more edge to it, okay? So here's the before and the after. It's very subtle. Let me go over here and just make it a little more noticeable. So I'm going to grab just the whites, and I'm just going to just raise the whites, which is the background essentially, and make it a little bit brighter. All right. Now, if you look on the very bottom left of the screen, after I'm done making the edits, you see the looks button. Click looks. See my looks. I don't have any so far. If I click add, it'll ask me, hey, do you want to save a unique look with all the changes you just made? So we're just going to call this EtSEO, and I'm going to save that look. All right. And now I can apply that look to anything. So if I go back here, and I'm going to go back to the home screen, okay? And I'm going to grab this other coffee mug shot, or this one right here. Same one, but just pretend it's a different color coffee mug. So you have 7 different coffee mugs that you sell. And I go into my looks. Instead of having to go to each slider and remember exactly the adjustments I made, I just click my look. It applies everything we did on the previous one. So boom, 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 boom. In 2 seconds, I can just apply this over and over again to every product. And now you've got that nice consistency across the board. They all have the same sharpness, all of the same vibrance, all of the same color, and you're good to go. Now, the other cool thing you can do in here is this is Photoshop. So there's a bunch of neat things that I don't want to get into here because this is more of an advanced editing class, but you can do healing where you can kind of erase things out of the scene, which is really nice. So you can get rid of some of the shadow. There's a lot of stuff you can do there. But right now, you all should probably have access to Adobe Express, which is awesome because if you want to start doing graphic designs for social media and things like that, this is where you would go. But let me go ahead and add our coffee cup shot, okay? And I'm going to pull that one in. and say I wanted to drop my coffee cup into some kind of design. I wanted to put it on a cool festive background or something like that. Well, what I would do is get rid of that, drag that out of the way. I would go over here, I would tap on the image, and there's a big button right there that says remove background. I just click remove background, look at what it does. Instantly cuts this thing out, and then I can put it on any color background I want. Look at that. So I could put this on a greeting card, I could put graphics there, I could put another photo behind it, maybe a beautiful scene, like, you know, I've got a fireplace in the background and I can float it in there. So what used to take a lot of time in Photoshop for us editors back in the day, now can be done with the click of a button. So to recap really quick, your photos can be edited in your natural photo editing software very quick and easily and efficiently without a single thing purchased, no extra apps, no extra software. You can edit really beautifully right here, just doing exposure, highlights, shadows, contrast, and sharpness. Then you can go into Photoshop Express if you want, and that's how you just do the same thing, but it just makes it a little easier to apply those edits to multiple photos for consistency. And then finally, you can go into Adobe Express for your finished design. That's where you make your social media stuff, your posts, your stories, your reels, that kind of stuff. That's where you have all the really cool features in there. So you can do it all from your phone for free with what's included with your phone. And then there's 1 or 2 free apps, and you have a free demo with another one that gives you a lot of options in there. So that's what we've got. I'm sure we've got a bunch of questions. Just to recap from the top really quick, you're going to want 2 main kinds of photos. You're going to want your studio shot, which is the white background like we edited. And then you're going to want lifestyle shots so people can not only see what the product is when they're looking at the grid, then they can click in, and that's when you tell the story of your product, where it might live, how they might use it, how big it is, that kind of stuff. That way it really helps you sell that sale. And that's how good photography takes you from being found amongst a grid of your competing stores on Etsy to getting clicked into your store. And then good lifestyle photography takes them from being in your store to falling in love with your product, to put it in the cart, to purchasing. And that's why photography is so important on this EtSEO journey, getting you from, you know, the beginning to the end and resulting in a sales and happy customers. So Julio, what kind of questions do we have in the chat? Anything good to queue up? Because I know we're just about at the end of time for the event.
Should the poster board be matte or glossy?
Oh, great question. Okay, so the matte or glossy, it doesn't matter, use what you've got, but the glossy is going to be highly reflective, so it's going to be easy to make that look like pure white, to get it to overexpose if you use the glossy. If you use the matte, I recommend that you go in and do the editing and take the highlight or the white slider and raise it up. So with a matte board, it probably won't look pure white in camera, but with editing you can get there. With the glossy poster board, it's easier to blow it out and overexpose it. That's a really good question.
Outdoors instead of indoor. What's some tips if you want to shoot outdoors?
Yeah,
with the light?
outdoor. Got a bunch of tips for you. Woo! There we go. This guy right here, okay? Any kind of big reflector like this. Here you go. Sorry, I'm messing Julio up because I'm getting the giant accessories here. This big diffusion material would work great because you can set up your product photography outside. And someone had a question about flat lays, right? And I said I would get to it. So I want to show you how we would do that right here, okay? I would just go out there with my piece of foam core, with my wallpaper that looks like marble or wood or whatever, and I would lay this on the ground outside, okay? And then just lean this over like this. And this would take all that really bright, direct sunlight and soften it. So this essentially becomes like a giant window, which is really nice and handy. Are they able to see that pretty well? And then you can put your product right down there, and then you can just shoot down it as a flat lay. Or if you're trying to do a sweep, you're probably gonna have to bring out like a little step stool or something like that to get the sweep. But outdoor is great. The other thing too, if you don't want to deal with this kind of stuff, is I love what we call covered shade. So covered shade is when you go out and you've got like overhangs of like a roof eave, or you've got big tree branches. I would get out there and get right inside the shade line. So you'll be able to look on the ground and you'll see where the sun is and where the shade begins. I would go just inside the shade, and then that's where I would place my products. And then I would still bring out a little bit of foam core to use the reflector. So outdoors works just as well as the window. Yep, same thing.
Fabrics. Any tips on fabrics?
Oh, fabrics. I don't really generally use the fabric backdrops because there's so much maintenance. You have to steam them and stuff. Oh, shooting fabrics. Steam, steam, steam. Get a steamer, handheld steamer. I can't press this enough. Get a steamer. If you're shooting fabrics, you should always have a steamer going in, like just a little handheld steamer plugged in somewhere. The biggest complaint I hear from people about stores and e-commerce and online photography is that people don't take the time to steam the clothes, get the wrinkles out. You know, how often do you look at your closet and you see that wrinkled shirt and you don't want to wear it and you already own it? How difficult do you think it's going to be to convert someone to buy a product if it looks already wrinkled? So that's the same process. So you always want to have a steamer, make sure you knock the wrinkles out. As far as photographing, there's a great guide in the seller handbook on Etsy for photography about how to find models and how to work with models. But if you can't work with models or you can't find one available, dress forms are great, like the mannequin kind of fittings. They're wonderful because they don't move. You don't have to worry about accidentally poking them with a pin if you're trying to pin your clothing and stuff. And at the beginning, we were talking about props. I would get tissue paper, and you can scrunch up tissue paper, and it's a great way to get some volume in your clothes or your fabrics when you're photographing soft goods and clothing specifically.
Large products.
Large products. That's where photo paper is going to come in handy. So if it's bigger than poster board or this roll, you're going to want to look for what's called seamless photo paper. There's a couple brands in the space, and they make big seams of that rolling paper that are up to 9 feet to 12 feet wide. Big product photography, unfortunately, that's where you got to go with the bigger paper. Same thought process applies. You know, you just need a bigger piece of paper to put it on. What if you're your own model? Okay, I would get a Bluetooth trigger for your phone, okay? So use a tripod, set it up, and also get a Bluetooth trigger and overshoot. That would be my big thing. Just overshoot. Get out there, have fun with it. You know, when you're your model, you have to have realistic lifestyle expressions and stuff. So enjoy the process. And I would get a Bluetooth remote trigger for your phone and a tripod situation, set it up, and just have fun with the process. There's going to be a lot of bad photos in there, but it's really cool when you walk away with one of the good ones. Art prints. Art print is something I can't really speak to, honestly. I've always been a commercial photographer, so I'm basically shooting to the specific needs of the customer. So that's one of those. I don't want to tell you the wrong thing. Ring lights. Okay, ring lights. I was going to talk about ring lights. You notice how when we set up the product photography, I didn't have the light behind me. I didn't have the light on top of the camera. Ring lights are designed to get rid of shadow. The reason how they're able to do that is because the camera is in the middle of the light source, in the middle of the ring of light, and that way all the shadow is behind the subject, so you can't see it. The problem is things don't look three-dimensional if there's no shadow. They look flat. So I would not use ring lights for product photography because the shadow is what creates and shows the texture and the detail of your products, especially if you're doing fabrics or something that's got a really cool texture to it. The ring light will obliterate the shadows, which means they won't be able to see the texture and detail. So the ring lights will actually hide the beautiful details of your products versus bring them out. So I don't recommend ring lights for product photography.
Reflections when it comes to jewelry.
Oh, light tents. That's somewhere where you need light tents, which are a little more specific. So let me see if I could build one out here really quick. If you're photographing jewelry and it's super highly reflective, that is a great question. You're going to want, and here's the thing, quite simply. Jewelry, unless it's a super flat surface, sees just about everything. So it's like jewelry is just a bunch of mirrors, essentially. All right. So what you want to do is you want to build in kind of a light box as much as you can. Okay. And pretend that this would be, so you always want to have more clamps. And where's my product? I'll just put a water cup in there. Okay. So one of these camera angles able to kind of see that I'm back in like a little light box here, more or less. All right. So what I would recommend doing, I'm trying to do this on the fly for y'all. What I would recommend doing here is building out white reflectors on all sides. All right. And let's see if we can do the sweep here too. And I would love to potentially put together a jewelry specific talk, because jewelry photography is hands down one of the most difficult kinds of product photography that exists, because it's like you're photographing tons of mirrors. So the secret to getting around that is you need to be able to have a white surface for every plane or mirror of that piece of jewelry to see. So most people get this far. They go buy a light tent offline or something like that, okay? So light tents are really good, but if you look here, the sides, the back, the bottom, even the top with a light tent are all white. But what you're seeing from the front of the jewelry is reflections of your living room or your studio or your office, whatever's behind you. So your jewelry is reflecting all of this. So what I recommend you do is take a big piece of foam core or poster board like this, and you cut a hole in it, okay? And then you shoot through it like this. So you're shooting through a hole here, so your jewelry is completely encased in white. And that way, no matter what angle, no matter where the surface of that jewelry is pointing, it's going to reflect back white surfaces, which gives you all the different details in the planes of that jewelry. That way, someone doesn't zoom in on one of your photo and see your golden retriever here in a reflection, and your husband or wife running around in the kitchen behind you in your photographs, because it's just all reflections. So cut a hole in the center of a piece of foam core or poster board and shoot through it. That is the last piece of the puzzle for y'all. And that way you'll be able to get great jewelry photography. You get those beautiful, clean, white highlights on every surface, and you won't have to do any retouching, which is the best part. Great question.
Any tips for t-shirt photography?
T-shirt photography? Steamer and the T-pins. So let me get those pins again. And can you go to the iPhone camera? Okay. T-shirt photography is a tough one, believe it or not. Soft goods are actually really difficult to photograph. So let's look at this and just pretend this is a T-shirt. We on the tight one? Yeah. Okay. So what you would do is say this is the arm of a T-shirt. So here's the body of the T-shirt, and this is the armhole where the arm comes out, okay? Let's pretend that's what we're working with right there. All right, well, a lot of the times, this will like curl up and look kind of weird. Has anyone run into that if they're photographing T-shirts? This is where the T-pins come in handy, because what you're gonna do is get inside here, okay? And then puncture this into your foam core. And then that way you're stretching out the fabric, okay? And then you put the top of it down, and now it's perfectly there. And now if I wanted this to be more fleshed out, so I have a little more volume to it, so it just doesn't look like a flat, boring T-shirt shot, that's where I would go ahead and I would get tissue paper. In this case, we don't have tissue paper, so just as an example, I'll use aluminum foil. So you would take tissue paper and very lightly, don't crush it, very lightly fold the tissue paper. Okay, might be too much because it's just a little sleeve. And then you would work it in there, kind of like this. So that way, now if we zoom in on that, that way looks like there's volume to the arm of this T-shirt, and it's still fully spread out. You're not getting like the puckering of the sides of the T-shirt or the wrists, the wrists of the T-shirt if it were a long sleeve shirt or something like that. So between tissue paper and pins and setting it up and staging it on foam core, that's the combination that allows you to really perfect this. And then I can photograph it flat against a wall if I wanted, or I could also go flat lay down. So look at that. Perfect. So that way you can have a full T-shirt on a foam core board and do that. And if you can have like a friend or family helping you out, someone can be tacking and stuffing a shirt while you're photographing one, and then you just swap out. You can do a conveyor belt system. So friends and family help so much when it comes to product photography, soft good styling, and stuff like that. Great question. So T-pins on foam core with a little bit of little tissue paper in there.
Photographing white products.
Oh, white products. Great question. My God, you guys got so many good ones. Etsy, I'm sorry I'm running over. I think I'm going to need 3 hours for the next one. Okay. White products are kind of difficult, but I'll show you what to do. Okay, so let's go over to tight cam again here. So if we're on the tight camera, right? Okay, so let's pop over to the wide, just so I can show this really quick. So when you're photographing white on white on white, what you really need to do is actually, instead of worrying about illuminating everything, you want to worry about building shadow. So that's why black foam core is really important. So this is a same thing as the white foam core we're using as a reflector, but this is just a black version. This is called negative fill. So instead of positively filling in the shadow side with light, we're negatively subtracting light from the shadow side. So let's flip over to the phone camera for a second. We over there? All right, so what I'm going to do is, this is the white reflector on the left side. Look what happens when I bring in the black reflector. See how all of a sudden I have dimension to the product? White on white is tough, but if I bring the black reflector around the back side, I'm able to get a black highlight here, separating the product from the background, still maintaining the white reflector and highlight up front, and then the light from the window here. So if you look at that, that's how I would photograph white on white using a black reflector. If I don't have the black reflector, then it becomes kind of difficult because there's not enough separation there. So this isn't a perfect example because I would need like bigger foam core, but you can see how the black reflector, the negative reflector, actually brings in and adds shadow there. So that's a really great question, and I hadn't covered that, so thank you for throwing that out there. But it's just as important to have black reflectors as it is to have white reflectors on set, because they both serve different purposes. So if a product's looking flat because there's no shadow, that's why you would go ahead and add shadow with this. Cool. Digital products? Oh, I don't have a lot of experience on that one. So if you have the question about digital products, elaborate in the Q&A section, and I'll make sure that someone from Etsy gets you an answer on that one.
Covered a lot of the main questions.
Cool. Okay, so that's what we've got for y'all. Thank you so much for tuning in. Photography is immensely important, from getting people to land on your store and then fall in love with your products and then hit that purchase. Thank you again to the sellers for sending the beautiful products out for us to use for this demonstration. I'm sorry we couldn't get to everything. Please throw your questions in the Q&A section. That way myself and people from Etsy can follow up if we didn't get those answered.
How big of a hole in the white do you shoot through it for jewelry?
Oh, good question. So I'm shooting through for jewelry. How big of a hole in the white do you want to do? As little as possible. Because remember, the whole purpose of having this so we can shoot through it is that we want the product to reflect back all the whiteboard and not reflect back the dark camera. We don't want it to see the back of the camera. So if I were just using my iPhone, I would make the hole slightly larger than my iPhone camera. So like itty bitty. And then you just bring it up as close to your camera as possible.
True colors. How do you get to your true color of your product?
True color of your product. Okay. That right there. Do we have the color checker up here? So true color, what you're going to want to do is get a gray card. Okay. It's a neutral 18 to 19% gray. You can find them online. They're probably only $1 or $2. Or you can simply take a white background here, and then in a photo editing app like Photoshop Express, that PS Express from Adobe that we covered, there's actually a white balance selector. And what you would do is you would bring up the photo you're working on, and then you would take an eyedropper tool and tell the app, hey, this background right here is pure white. Okay. Now balance off of that, and your camera and the editing app will then change all your colors around to become in line so that the background looks pure white. And then in the process, all of your colors shift down to what they actually look like in real life. Now, color management for products is a very exact science. So I would definitely recommend following up with me afterwards or putting the question in there, because there's products called a color checker that actually has, 32 different color swatches on it that are pre-calibrated, and there's standalone software for your computer. So we can get really into the weeds and how to get exact color. But the short, quick, simple, easy answer is photograph on a white background, or if you're photographing the studio shot where there is no white background, put a white card or a gray card in there, and then later in your software you can say, hey, this card is pure white, change all my colors and balance them accordingly, and then it'll go ahead and fix it for you to get accurate colors.
Everything else is pretty much consistent. The other one that I keep seeing is about fabrics. Just creating, how do you create texture and dimension in fabrics?
Okay, good. That's a great question. I think that's the one to go home with, or to sign off with. So let me see if I can find a fabric. Let me bring this one back out, or what's got a cool texture. This has got a cool texture. Okay, so let's go. So I've just got a little case for like my multi-tool here. Let me set this up. How you show texture. Let's go to the iPhone camera. Here we go. How you show texture is entirely dependent on where your light comes from. So if you see how I'm zoomed in here, look at how much texture you're seeing in this fabric. Now, the reason you see that is if you look closely here, look at the weave. See how there is a light and a dark portion, a highlight and a shadow to the weave? That's because the light is coming from this way. So any of the fabric standing up on this side is illuminated, and any of the fabric on the far side is in the shadow. And it's called chiaroscuro. It's the play between the light and the dark that creates the contrast, and that's how you bring out shadow. So if you want more contrast in your product photography, move your light away from the camera. Okay, so go to the wide shot for this. So right now I've got here's my camera angle, and my light is coming in from like 45 degrees on the right. So that's the most extreme angle I can get my light at, which means this is going to give me the most extreme level of detail and contrast. Now, the reason why I don't like ring lights is because a ring light, imagine all the light coming from the same direction here. Where's the shadow? The shadow then falls on the back side where it can't be seen. So if you use a ring light, you have no texture because all you see is the bright highlight of the reflection of the ring. Okay? So if I move over here, it might be kind of hard, but already with the window behind my back, I'm going to have less detail because the light's all coming from one direction, the same direction as my camera. Then moving back over to the side, look at how much more detail I have just moving to the side. So the key to getting texture and detail, the more texture and detail you want, the farther away from your camera you put your light. The less texture and detail you want, the closer you bring your light to your camera, almost like a ring light, and it obliterates all the shadow. All right. Cool. All right. Well, thank you so much for tuning in, everybody. And all the great questions and stuff, too. The questions really drive this because we're trying to speak to so many different kinds of product photography. And each kind of product photography, I feel, is its own little subgenre, subspecialization. So thank you for the great questions. Thank you, Etsy, for putting on a wonderful event. I'd love to follow up, and I know a bunch of Etsy staffers will be following up, too. So leave your questions down there, and I hope to see you guys at an event soon. And best of luck with all the beautiful photography you're going to be creating and the consistency and optimization you're going to be putting into your workplace. So have a great afternoon or morning, depending on where you're at.